Hi, my name's Marla, and my mother told me, feed him or get out, worthless. She meant her new husband's grown son. That night, I walked out with $1, a broken arm, and no toothbrush. They never called, never asked, just swept me out of their lives like dust. You want to know what hurts more than the bruises? Being erased by the people who raised you, but they didn't expect me to keep the records or take it all the way to court. They raised me like a tool, so I let them rust. But if you think that's the end of the story, you haven't heard what came next. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by your own blood and told to stay silent? Stick around, you're not alone. The night started like any other, quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the air, where even the sound of silverware feels like an intrusion. I was 17, and my job, apparently, was to pretend that dinner was something sacred. Mom called it family time. I called it a stage. The table was set, though not for me. Harlan sat at the head, his son Trent on his right, Mom on his left. I stood near the kitchen doorway, watching steam rise from a bowl of mashed potatoes I wasn't allowed to touch. The smell of grease clung to my skin. Harlan's voice broke the silence. Trent eats first. I didn't look up. I'd learned not to. Mom's eyes, sharp as the knife by her plate, pinned me where I stood. "You heard your stepfather," she said, her tone light but laced with warning. "The king eats first." Trent grinned, tapping his fork like he was waiting for a servant. His plate was empty, his confidence wasn't. "Marla," Mom said again, this time sweeter, meaner. "Be a dear. Serve your brother." He wasn't my brother, not in blood, not in spirit. I picked up the serving spoon anyway, scooped a pile of potatoes, and set the bowl in front of him. I didn't make eye contact. I knew better. "That's not all," Harlan said. "Bring him the gravy, too. And after dinner, go clean his bathroom. Trent's been too busy with school to keep up." Something in me snapped before I even knew it. Maybe it was the way Trent leaned back, smug, like he'd earned the right to be waited on. Maybe it was the way Mom pretended this was normal. "I'm not cleaning his bathroom," I said quietly. My voice came out small but steady. The sound of forks clinking against plates froze. Harlan's hand stopped midair. Mom's face didn't move, but her eyes went darker. "What did you say?" she asked. I said I'm not cleaning his bathroom. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd hear me. Maybe she'd see me as something other than an object that owed obedience. But she laughed instead, a sharp sound that made my chest tighten. "You think you get to decide what you do?" She leaned closer. "You live under this roof. You follow our rules. You don't clean his bathroom, you can clean the streets." Trent chuckled, low and satisfied. "Guess the maid's on strike." That's when Harlan stood. The chair legs scraped against the tile, loud, deliberate. He unbuckled his belt, slowly, like he wanted me to understand every sound. The metal buckle clicked, a sound I still can't forget. "Harlan," Mom murmured, pretending to protest. "She needs to learn respect." "I'll make sure she does," he said. The first hit stole my breath, not because it was the hardest, but because it confirmed what I already knew. There was no love left in that house, just power, cold and practiced. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. He kept swinging until the sound of leather on skin blurred into a dull roar in my ears. The smell of dinner still lingered, gravy, grease, and something metallic. My arm went numb. Mom watched. She didn't blink. When it was over, I was on the floor, my cheek pressed against the cool tile. My breathing was shallow. The only sound was Trent's quiet laughter. "Get up," Mom said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You made your choice. Get out." She reached into her apron and tossed something at me. a dollar bill, crumpled, oily from her fingers. There, don't say I never gave you anything. I stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her. You're really doing this? Don't make this about you, she said, her tone suddenly soft, almost pitying. You brought this on yourself. A real daughter would know her place. I don't remember walking to the door. I just remember the cold air hitting my face when it opened. Rain had started to fall, slow and deliberate, like the sky didn't want to witness this either. I stepped out barefoot, my left arm cradled against my ribs. Behind me, the door shut with a hollow thud. It sounded final. I stood there, shaking, the night pressing in around me. The porch light flickered once, then died. The street was empty, the air thick with rain and exhaust. I looked down at the dollar in my hand, then back at the house. They didn't call after me. No one did. I started walking, one block, then another. Every step made the pain sharper, but I didn't stop. Somewhere between the third and fourth block, I realized I wasn't crying. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Dust doesn't cry, I whispered to myself. That's what she'd called me once. Dust. Useless. Forgettable. Something that only existed to be swept away. But standing there under the streetlight, rain dripping down my face, I understood something I hadn't before. Dust might be small, but it never really disappears. It settles. It waits. And I was done being swept away. The rain had turned colder by the time I made it 2 miles down that cracked sidewalk. My arm ached with every step, the weight of it pulling against the rest of me like an anchor. My bare feet were raw, and the streets were quiet, save for the occasional hiss of tires on wet pavement. Somewhere behind me, my old life was sealing itself shut like a rusted door. But I didn't look back. A flickering neon sign buzzed ahead. Silver Pine Inn. The V in silver was missing, so it blinked like a broken heartbeat. Siler Pine Inn. I stood under the awning for a moment, watching rain drip from the edge of the sign. My reflection stared back at me in the glass door. Swollen eye, split lip, hair matted to my face. I looked like a kid caught in a fight no one believed she didn't start. I stepped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of old coffee and pine sol. Dim light from a dusty lamp cast shadows on wood-paneled walls. A woman sat behind the front desk, flipping through a crossword book. She looked up the moment the bell above the door jingled. Her hair was silver and tucked behind one ear, her eyes clear and unreadable. She didn't ask what happened, didn't ask my age, didn't ask for a name. Instead, she rose slowly, walked around the desk, and placed a small white towel in my hand. Bathroom's just down that hall. There's antiseptic in the cabinet. Bandages, too. I must have hesitated, because she added, "It's clean, no charge." I nodded once and moved toward the hallway. My legs felt like tree branches, stiff and unsure. The bathroom door creaked open, and the smell of cheap soap filled my nose. I clicked the lock, slid to the floor, and let the towel fall in my lap. The mirror above the sink was cracked, a jagged vein splitting my reflection in two. On one side, I saw the bruises. The other half, blank, hollow. I ran a damp cloth along my jaw, watching dirt and dried blood smear across the glass. My shoulder throbbed. Every motion sent sparks through the bone. I thought of Mom's voice. "Don't come back. This door won't open for you again." I stared into the mirror, breathing through my nose to stop the stinging in my eyes. Slowly, I reached up and traced the outline of the door in the reflection. Just an invisible line from one corner to the other, like I was drawing a shape only I could see. "Maybe some doors aren't meant to," I whispered. When I came back out, she was waiting at the front desk. A chipped mug of soup sat beside a key. I hesitated, then reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled dollar bill, the one my mother had thrown at me like trash. I set it on the counter, barely able to look at it. The woman glanced down at it, then slid it back without a word. "You'll pay me when you start breathing again," she said. And just like that, something in me cracked. Not loud, not dramatic. More like the sound of old ice shifting on a pond. A small piece of fear lifted off my chest. She handed me the key. "Room 3. Towels are in the closet. If you want food in the morning, knock before 8. I nodded. My voice was stuck somewhere between "thank you" and "please don't be kind to me." Inside the room, the air was warm, faintly musty, like a place that had held too many secrets. The bedspread was worn, the lamp flickered, but it was mine. No shouting, no footsteps on the stairs, no orders barked across the dinner plates. Just silence. I lay on my side, watching the clock blink 11:47, 11:48, then nothing. Sometime near dawn, I woke up needing water. My throat was dry, mouth bitter. I sat up slowly, walked to the sink, and cupped water into my hands. As I leaned over, I noticed a smear on the edge of the mirror. Dust, faint and golden in the rising light. I swiped it away with the sleeve of my borrowed sweatshirt, then paused, watching the tiny particles drift and scatter in the air. "Still here," I murmured. I thought about invisible kids. The ones who sit quietly, make no demands, stay out of the way. The ones who become experts at reading the room before they even learn how to spell. I'd been one of those. Silence had been my shelter. But now, in this room that smelled like mothballs and old hope, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't safe either. But I was real. I curled back onto the bed, wrapping the blanket tight. Not because I was cold, but because I needed to feel something holding me, even if it was just cotton and polyester. There was no plan, no next step. But the fear that had followed me out the door last night was quieter now, distant. The motel door was shut, locked, but it didn't feel like exile. It felt like protection. And for the first time in a long while, I thought maybe this stillness, was a kind of beginning. But peace doesn't last when people like them need someone to blame. I was starting to believe in silence. 3 weeks had passed since I'd walked out of that house with nothing but a busted arm and a bruised heart. The bruises had turned yellow, then faded. My shoulder still ached if I moved too fast, but I was breathing again. Slow, steady, and on my own terms. Mornings at the Silver Pine Inn were simple. Coffee brewed too long, toast too dry, and Evelyn humming gospel under her breath as she wiped the front desk. I swept the hallway floors when I could. It wasn't a job, more like something to keep my hands from shaking. Some mornings I'd wake with my heart racing and no clue why. But by noon, I was usually calm again. That Tuesday felt no different until the motel phone rang. It wasn't my room phone, it was the one in the lobby. The old beige rotary bolted to the wall beside the keys. Evelyn had gone into town for supplies, and I'd offered to watch the desk. Nobody ever called. The phone just sat there like a forgotten prop from another decade. But that day, it rang. I stared at it. Once, twice. On the third ring, I picked it up. "Silver Pine Inn," I said, trying to sound like I belonged. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard since the night she slammed the door behind me. "Marla?" Just my name. No warmth, no question mark. Like I'd been summoned, not called. I didn't speak. My throat felt full of gravel. "It's your mother," she continued. "We told the neighbors you're off finding yourself. Don't make us out to be liars." That's how she started. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not even, "We've been worried." No. She came in like a manager cleaning up a mess. "I assume you're still at that motel," she said next, her voice clipped and businesslike. "It's fine. Do what you need. Just don't cause trouble. No calls to the school, no letters to family. You've embarrassed us enough." I didn't answer. You can come back, she added. Quietly, Harlan, regrets how things got out of hand. You'll have your own room, no drama, but we expect you to act like part of this family, not some victim with a grudge. My grip on the receiver tightened. I could hear my pulse in my ears. What about Trent? I asked. There was silence. The line didn't crackle. It just went cold. He's family, she said finally. You're complicated. That word, complicated. Like I was a stain on a record, a bad mark on a good name. Something that needed fixing or erasing. I closed my eyes and pressed my lips together. I don't know why I asked next. Maybe I wanted to see if there was a shred of love left in her voice. Did you miss me? Another pause. Then, we're doing what's best for everyone. Don't be selfish, Marla. Don't make this harder than it already is. And just like that, I understood. She wasn't calling out of guilt. She was calling because she'd lost control of the story. I'd left, and, worse, I hadn't come crawling back. In her world, image was everything. The mask had cracked, and she needed me to seal it back together. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just set the phone down on the receiver, carefully, like placing a glass on the edge of a counter. I didn't want it to break. I walked back into the hallway and leaned against the wall. My knees felt hollow. I looked up at the ceiling and let out a short breath that started as a laugh and ended as something closer to a sob. Not loud, not messy, just real. Later that night, Evelyn found me in the hallway. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing the floor with a rag and a bucket of warm water. It was almost midnight. She stood over me for a while, saying nothing. "You don't have to do that," she said gently. I didn't stop scrubbing. "I know." "Then why?" I wrung out the rag and looked at the floor, at the wet circles I'd made. My voice was small when it came out. "Because it's the only time I get to feel clean." She didn't say anything else, just sat beside me on the hallway bench and watched. The light above us flickered once, then held steady. In the morning, the floor I'd scrubbed caught the sun, and in that strip of golden light, I saw it. A fine trail of dust dancing just above the wood. I watched it shift, float, scatter. Still here, maybe dust didn't cry. But it stayed. So did I. But they weren't done with me. And I wasn't done learning what silence could do. I didn't go back to the phone after that night. I didn't tell Evelyn about the call. I just poured coffee, wiped counters, and scrubbed floors. It was easier that way. It kept the noise in my head quiet. Evelyn found me a job at Penny's Diner just off Route 84. Small place. Vinyl booths, cracked menus, regulars who always tipped in coins and folded ones. She knew the owner, said they needed someone steady for the lunch shift. "You've got strong shoulders, Marla," she told me. "And quiet's not a flaw in a place like this." I started 2 weeks later. First few days, my body still moved like it remembered pain. I flinched when someone dropped a fork. I kept my sleeves long, even though the weather was warming up. I said, "Yes, ma'am," and "Yes, sir," too often. But nobody asked questions. Nobody made me explain. Then Thursday came. It was the lunch rush. Steady, loud, full of greasy smells and conversation. I was balancing 2 plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes when I saw the door swing open. Harlan walked in first. Wide stance, belt buckle shining like he polished it just for the occasion. Trent followed, taller now, broader. But his eyes, same smug gleam, same crooked smirk. They chose a booth near the counter. Close enough for me to hear them, but not close enough to escape. I kept serving tables, acted like I didn't see them. But I saw. Every move, every glance. They waited until I passed their table with the pitcher of sweet tea. "Well, well," Harlan said, voice too loud for a man who claimed to be private. "Didn't expect to find our little helper here? You remember how she used to fix my plate, Trent? Always quiet. Real family girl. Trent leaned back, arms stretched across the booth. She was better at laundry, I think. Right, Marla? I didn't stop walking. I set down a glass at the next table, poured tea, smiled at a couple in their 60s who didn't notice the tension in the air. Then I turned around. I walked past their booth and paused by the empty one beside them. Picked up a rag, wiped crumbs from a table that didn't need cleaning. My voice came low, calm. "You must be proud," I said. "Training your boy to talk down to women, that must take real effort." Harlan's smile froze. Trent shifted. I didn't look at them. I didn't have to. Silence settled like a fog. Thick, slow, suffocating. From behind the counter, I felt Evelyn's gaze. I glanced up. She didn't nod. Not much. But just enough to tell me she saw. They didn't say another word. They ate fast, didn't finish. Left a $5 bill and a mess of crumbs. As they walked out, Harlan dropped something folded on the counter. I waited until they were gone to pick it up. A piece of paper, clean fold, familiar handwriting. "Your mother wants to see you. Don't make this ugly. No signature, no apology, just a threat dressed in civility." I folded it again and slipped it in my apron pocket. Later that evening, after closing up and helping wipe down the booths, I walked home the long way, the one that passed the post office and the old church with the leaning cross. I needed the air. Back at the Silver Pine, Evelyn had left the porch light on. Inside, the room was quiet. Just the soft tick of the heater and the faint sound of wind brushing against the window. I sat at the little desk under the lamp and took out a shoebox I'd kept under the bed. Inside, the hospital wristband, still curled, photos of the bruises I took with a disposable camera Evelyn gave me, a printed copy of the ER visit summary. I added the note. Then I opened a notebook and started writing. Not journaling, not emotions, just facts, dates, names, what was said, what was done. I labeled the cover with 3 words. The dust file, because dust doesn't cry, but it clings, it settles, it stays, even when people pretend it's gone. And I wasn't planning to be swept away again. They closed one door. I'm learning to build another. But when you threaten people who live off lies, they don't stay quiet for long. But when you threaten people who live off lies, they don't stay quiet for long. It came on a Tuesday morning, tucked among the junk mail and diner coupons Evelyn left on the front desk. A white envelope, thick, with my name written in slanted handwriting I'd know even if the ink had faded. My mother's. I didn't open it right away. I stood there for a good minute, staring at it like it might hiss if I touched it. The return address wasn't theirs. She was smart enough for that. But the perfume gave her away. Lily by Night. She'd worn it since I was 10. It used to mean bedtime stories and soft sweaters. Now it smelled like warning. I brought the envelope to my room, set it on the table, and made coffee I didn't drink. For an hour, I just looked at it. The paper gleamed under the lamp, as if waiting to pull me back into a world I'd already buried. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery, the kind she reserved for holiday cards. The handwriting was flawless, every letter perfectly shaped. "Marla, you were always too sensitive. We all said things we didn't mean. Come home. We'll pretend this never happened." Mom. That line, "Pretend this never happened." My fingers trembled, just slightly. Not from fear. From recognition. Those 5 words were her favorite weapon. When I was little and Dad left, she said it then too. When Harlan first hit me and I cried, she whispered it again. When Trent crossed the line and she turned away, she said it a 3rd time. Pretend this never happened. She didn't want healing. She wanted silence dressed as peace. I read it again, slower this time. There was a faint smudge of lipstick beside her name. Not a mistake, but a signature. like she wanted me to remember her softness before she cut me open again. I laid the paper flat and pressed my palms against it, as if to make sure it was real. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from something sharper. Disbelief that I could still be surprised. For a moment, I almost folded it back up. Almost saved it. Some part of me, the daughter part, wanted to keep it as proof that maybe she cared. But the woman in me, the one who'd learned how to survive, knew better. I got up, took an empty coffee tin from the counter, and carried it outside. The sun was low, the air cool. I dropped the letter inside the tin and struck a match. It caught fast. The perfume made the paper curl and darken in seconds. The smoke rose in lazy spirals. Sweet at first, then sour, like sugar burned too long. "Love shouldn't smell like fear," I said softly. The words left my mouth before I even realized I was speaking. When the fire died, I stirred the ashes with a spoon until they were nothing but gray dust. The scent still hung in the air. I coughed, stepped back, and felt my chest loosen in a way it hadn't since that night I walked away. Later, Evelyn found me sitting on the front steps, the tin between my feet. She looked at the smoke trail still twisting into the dark sky. "Bad news?" she asked gently. I nodded. "A letter from my mother." She sat down beside me, didn't touch me, didn't pry. After a while, I said, "She used to hold me when I was sick, used to brush my hair and hum. I can't even touch her words now without shaking." Evelyn tilted her head. "That's not weakness, honey. That's your body remembering truth." Her voice wasn't pitying. It was steady, like she'd lived long enough to recognize the weight of inherited pain. We sat there in silence, listening to the night insects. The tin beside me was still warm. After she went inside, I carried it to my room, opened my box, the dust file. Inside, photos, hospital papers, the note Harlan left, and now, the ashes. I poured them into a small jar and sealed it tight. Labeled it Letter, March. I wasn't keeping it out of sentiment. I was keeping it because I finally understood something. You can burn what hurt you, but you don't have to erase it to be free of it. Smoke drifted through the cracked window, soft and thin. I watched it fade into the night, whispering, "You don't own my story anymore." But when the truth burns, the people who built their world on lies start smelling the smoke. It started small, like most fires do. A customer at the diner, a woman who always tipped in dimes, didn't meet my eye as I refilled her coffee. She kept stirring it, even though I hadn't put in sugar. Another guy, older in a plaid cap, muttered as I passed, "You don't mess with family." The words weren't for me, not directly, but they hit me square in the gut anyway. By Friday, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. Evelyn handed me a folded napkin someone had left on the counter. In ballpoint pen, it read, "Thief." That was it. Just one word. That was enough. In the kitchen, away from customers, Evelyn wiped her hands on a dish towel and asked gently, "You didn't tell me it'd follow you here?" I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, trying not to flinch. "That's how they work," I said. "They burn your name before you can rebuild it." Later that night, when the dishes were stacked and the diner lights dimmed to their evening hum, I sat alone in my room and stared at the empty space where peace had once stretched. I wasn't surprised. Harlan always moved fast when he felt exposed. Better to smear me now while the world still saw me as a runaway. He'd probably already planted the seed in the bar crowd, talked about how unstable I'd always been, how he and Irene took me in, like I was some stray mutt they were saintly enough to keep. And I knew Trent. He was the type to laugh along and add, "She snapped when Daddy said no." Make it sound like I'd stolen something. Money, maybe pride. The only thing I ever stole from them was silence. And that was the one thing they couldn't stand to lose. I didn't scream. I didn't show up at the bar to shout the truth or try to beg the town to believe me. I'd learned something Evelyn told me early on. The louder you yell, the easier they call you crazy. So I sat down with my old spiral notebook, pulled out the hospital discharge papers, and wrote a timeline. I matched bruises to dates. I added photos, emails I'd sent to no one, just to mark a memory. Then I printed copies and scanned them to my own email. I called it the dust file. Next morning, I walked to the sheriff's office and filed for a restraining order. I didn't tell Evelyn I was going. I didn't want her worrying or trying to talk me out of it. I knew I'd have to sit across from someone who might have gone to high school with Harlan. Someone who'd wonder why I waited. But when the deputy slid the form back toward me and said, "This is solid," I felt something shift in my spine. Not pride, just confirmation. That I wasn't making it all up. That silence could be shaped into evidence. On Sunday, I went to church. It wasn't for the sermon. I hadn't sat in a pew since I was 10, and even then I only went for the donuts after service. But Evelyn said something that stuck. Sometimes you show up not for God, but for the truth to be seen. So I, dressed in plain jeans and a sweater, pulled my hair back and sat in the last row. When Irene walked in, wearing cream, hair curled, a delicate cross at her throat, the whole room shifted, like she carried sorrow in her perfume. People leaned in, whispered. Someone hugged her. She pressed her hand to her heart like she was barely holding it together. I watched her the way you watch a magician, trying to find the sleight of hand. Then, as the hymn started, her eyes scanned the rows and landed on me. She froze. I didn't move, didn't blink. I didn't give her the reaction she wanted, the flinch, the apology, the shrinking. Instead, I stood, slowly, and as I walked past her row, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You can't pray your lies clean." Gasps. A few heads turned. One woman dropped her hymnal. I didn't wait for a response. I kept walking, sunlight from the stained glass window hitting my face just right. Enough to remind me that light can be beautiful, even when it's filtered through broken colors. Outside, the air was sharp. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt honest. And that was new. When I got home, I added the church bulletin to the dust file, not because it proved anything, but because it marked the day I finally stopped hiding in my own story. They'd set fire to my name. I wasn't going to waste time stomping out their sparks. I was building something fireproof. But when abusers lose control of the story, they stop talking and start acting. It was just after midnight. The kind of quiet where even the hum of the motel refrigerator felt too loud. I had just turned off the small desk lamp in the corner of my room and was sitting on the edge of the bed, flipping through a notepad where I kept small lists. Groceries, reminders, pieces of myself. Then I heard it. A faint scrape, slow, purposeful. At first, I thought it was the wind, until I heard the low slide of paper slipping against wood. My eyes snapped to the door. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, low and distant like an old grudge. I stood slowly, every step between the bed and the door stretched out like a decision I couldn't take back. There, against the dusty carpet, lay a white envelope. My name was written on the front in long, elegant loops I knew better than my own. My mother's handwriting. My hand hovered over it before I finally bent down. The paper was warm, as if it had carried the heat of whatever hands delivered it. I opened it. "If you keep making us look bad, we'll finish what we started. He's watching." No signature, no apology. Just those 2 sentences. He didn't need a name. I knew who that was. I knew the tone, the weight behind it. Harlan. For a few seconds I couldn't think, couldn't blink. The belt, the shouting, the way his voice would get calm before it got cruel, and the silence after. How I used to convince myself it was over if I just didn't move. But now, something else stirred. I walked to the dresser and picked up my phone. My fingers didn't shake, not this time. I dialed. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly. "I'd like to report a threat," I said, "and I have proof." The calmness in my voice surprised me. While waiting for the officer, I sat at the small kitchen table and opened the voice recorder on my phone. I read the letter aloud, slowly, clearly. The words sat heavy in the air as I spoke them, not like ghosts, but like evidence. It was almost 1 a.m. when Evelyn knocked softly and let herself in. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down across from me, placed a steaming mug of gas station coffee between us, and stayed quiet. After a long moment, she said, "You know this means they're scared." I looked at her, the corners of my lips barely turning up. "Good," I said. "I want them scared of the truth." By morning, the storm had passed, but the clouds still hung low like the town itself was holding its breath. I went to the diner early, opened up, wiped down the counters even though they were already clean, kept my phone in the apron pocket, set to record. The lunch crowd was just thinning when I heard it. The sharp slam of the front door. Harlan. He stormed in like he owned the place. Red in the face. Voice booming. "You think you're real clever, don't you?" he spat, pointing at me. "Dragging this family through the mud, making up lies. You're ruining everything we built." A few customers froze. Forks midair. One couple stopped chewing entirely. The whole room turned to watch. I stood still. Evelyn stepped out from behind the counter, slow but steady. She didn't yell, just pulled her phone from her pocket and said, "We record everything here." That stopped him. His mouth opened, then shut. His eyes flicked between us. Two women standing side by side, not budging. Harlan's jaw clenched. He looked around the diner and realized no one was on his side. Just a dozen silent witnesses. He turned on his heel and left, the door slamming hard behind him. I exhaled, not relief. Something sharper. Resolve. Later that night, I added the envelope to the dust file. I didn't burn it. I wanted to keep this one, proof of how fear changes form. That letter wasn't a warning, it was a confession. Not just of their threats, but of their panic. They knew I wasn't the girl in the corner anymore, and the next time they came for me, they wouldn't find silence. But when the storm cleared, I realized they weren't done yet. They were just getting desperate. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside the courthouse, the dust file tucked tight under my arm. It wasn't heavy in weight, but in meaning. Years of pain reduced to paper. The folder was worn now, fingerprints smudging the plastic, the tab slightly bent. But inside it was truth, not memories. Evidence. Evelyn parked the truck in silence. She didn't ask if I was ready. She knew I wasn't, and that I'd do it anyway. As we walked toward the steps, she stayed close but didn't hover. That was her way. Always there, never pushing. Inside, the room was colder than I expected. Bleached white walls, the faint scent of old coffee and copy toner. A judge sat at the front with the kind of stillness that made you feel like your heart was beating too loud. I saw them across the aisle before I even sat down. Irene wore a soft pink blazer, her hair curled neatly like she was headed to Sunday service, not to court. Harlan, in a button-down too tight across the gut, kept his arms crossed like the only thing he'd say today would be through gritted teeth. They didn't look at me, not at first. But I saw Irene's glance flicker my way, just for a moment. Enough to register that she noticed what I was carrying. The bailiff called my name. I stood, walked to the front, and took a breath. "I'd like to give a statement," I said. The judge nodded. "Go ahead, Ms. Quinn." I opened the folder. My voice didn't quiver, not this time. I started with the night they threw me out, The bruises, the broken arm, the silence. I spoke plainly, not like someone seeking pity, but like someone telling the weather. Cold facts, no flair. When I was 17, my mother told me I was dust. My stepfather beat me because I wouldn't serve his son like I was a maid. I was thrown out with $1 in my pocket and a fractured arm. And nobody called after me. Not once. I heard a chair creak. Then Irene's voice, sharp and shaky. She's exaggerating. We did what any parents would do when a child acts out. I turned to her, finally meeting her eyes. Then maybe you should have written that down too, I said, because I did. I laid the dust file on the table, one page at a time, the ER report, the X-ray image, photos Evelyn took of the bruises I still had when I first moved in with her, a copy of the restraining order request, the printed screenshot of the threat letter, even the little Ziploc with the ashes of the last one. Every paper made a sound when it hit the table, a soft slap of reality. Their lawyer leaned in to look. His face went pale as he turned each page, lips thinning to a line. The judge asked if I was seeking damages. I shook my head. I don't want their money, I said. I just want my name back. There was a pause that felt like a held breath. The judge cleared her throat. Restraining order granted. Based on submitted evidence and verbal testimony, I am also recommending psychological evaluations for Mr. Brooks and Ms. Vale, citing emotional endangerment. I don't remember walking out, not fully. My feet moved on their own. Evelyn touched my arm at one point, guiding me through the side door where the reporters waited like crows on a wire. One leaned forward with a recorder. Ms. Quinn, why now? I looked at him, not with anger, just certainty. Because silence is what they count on, I said, and I'm done helping them win. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. I just sat by the window in Evelyn's living room, watching the dusk settle like soft smoke. I thought reclaiming my name would feel like a parade. It didn't. It felt like breathing without pain. Like standing on your own legs for the first time after a long illness. Because what they tried to bury wasn't just me, it was the truth. And the truth doesn't stay buried if you're willing to dig it out with your own 2 hands. I tucked the dust file back into the drawer before bed. It didn't feel like a box of wounds anymore. It felt like armor. But even justice can't rewrite what's already burned into your bones. It's been 6 months. The seasons shifted while I wasn't looking. Winter thawed into spring, and now summer is humming outside my window. I live in a little 1-bedroom house just east of Austin. Not fancy, not new, but it's mine. The front porch creaks when you step onto it, and the screen door squeals every time I come home. Some folks might call it worn. I call it earned. My mornings are quiet now. I work part-time at a legal aid center, mostly filing forms and helping women get their paperwork in order. Restraining orders, custody petitions, affidavits. I show them how to document things, how to build what I once called the dust file. They don't always say thank you, but they look me in the eye. That's enough. Sometimes I catch a flicker of my old life in their stories. A bruise that's been hidden too well. A sigh that carries too much weight. I never press, I just listen. My left arm still aches when the weather turns. It's the same ache I had that winter night when the cold sank through my coat and into the fracture. The bone didn't heal perfect. You can feel the edge where it never quite smoothed out. But it reminds me of what hurt and of what I survived. Tonight, the sky is streaked in gold and apricot, fading into the soft navy of dusk. I'm on my porch with a chipped mug of coffee, rocking gently in a chair I picked up from a yard sale for $5. It creaks louder than the porch, but I've grown fond of the sound. Evelyn comes by most Fridays. Today she brought fresh sourdough and a jar of peach jam she got from a woman at church. She doesn't stay long, just enough to sit, eat a slice with me, swap a few harmless pieces of gossip, and remind me that I'm not alone. "You've done something brave," she said, her voice quiet as she wrapped up the leftover bread. I smiled at her, then shook my head. Brave feels too big. I just stopped letting fear sound louder than me. She looked at me for a long second, then nodded. We didn't need more words. After she left, I went inside and dug through a box I hadn't opened in a long while. One of those cardboard things you move from house to house but never unpack. It held a few broken photo frames, an old sweatshirt, a scarf that still smelled faintly of the diner's fryer grease. And at the bottom, I found it. A belt buckle. Rust had eaten into the edges, but I recognized it right away. Harlan's. He used to wear it like a badge, like it made him bigger than he was. I don't know how it ended up in my things. Maybe it stuck to something during a move. Maybe I kept it without realizing, a little piece of power I never meant to take with me. I held it for a while, long enough to feel its weight. Then I stepped outside and dropped it into the fire pit. I didn't light it immediately. I sat there, staring at it in the dimming light, hearing his voice in my memory, sharp, cruel, self-righteous. "You were never meant to be more than you are," he once said to me. I struck a match and tossed it in. The flame caught slow but steady. The metal glowed dull orange, then brighter, and tiny sparks lifted into the air like they'd been waiting to escape. "You raised me like a tool," I whispered. "So I let you rust." There was no one there to hear it but the fire. Later, I opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about this for weeks, maybe longer. I typed the title first, "The Price of Silence." The first line came without hesitation. Silence doesn't keep peace. It keeps wounds from healing. I wrote for hours, not like I was bleeding onto the screen. I'd done that already. This was something else, a reckoning, a record. I told the story not to get it off my chest, but to leave a trail for someone else. When I hit publish, I didn't expect much. But by morning, my inbox was full. Messages from women I'd never met. From grown men who'd been told not to cry. From daughters still carrying things their mothers said in the dark. One woman wrote, "You gave me words I didn't know I needed." Another simply said, "I thought I was the only one." I sat with those messages for a long time, letting them wash over me. Not every story was mine, but every pain was familiar. Before logging off, I scrolled to the end of my own article and added one last line. I used to think dust doesn't cry, but maybe it does, quietly, until someone listens. I didn't cry that night, not even when I closed the laptop, but I breathed deeper, the kind of breath that goes all the way down, not catching on old wounds. As I walked back out to the porch, the fire pit was cold, but the rusted buckle was gone, burned or buried in ash. It didn't matter. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. Some things don't need to shine again. Some are meant to rust. So we can.